Mayor Duggan delivers his State of the City address. From no-fault reform to his focus on equity, the mayor's here to talk about it. Should Kwame Kilpatrick be a free man? A state rep takes his case to the White House. And the doctor is in on the coronavirus. Today is Sunday, March 1st, 2020, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. Welcome to March. Huge political month. Super Tuesday, 2 days hence, and the Michigan primary a week after that. What kind of political impact would it have in the state of Michigan if the president were to grant clemency to former Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick? Provocative question, but one with a fair amount of life this week. We're going to talk about that a little later on. We're also going to be joined by our Dr. Frank McGeorge with a look at the thornier problems for doctors when it comes to the coronavirus. But up first, his State of the City address might have been subtitled Equity. Mayor Duggan again and again returned to the idea of equity, getting Detroiters a fair shake, whether it's getting them affordable auto insurance or making sure they share in the jobs and largesse of the city's resurgence. Mayor Mike Duggan is up first this morning on Flashpoint. This past week, Mayor Duggan delivered his 7th State of the City address. There was plenty in it to chew on, and let's do that this morning with the mayor of the city of Detroit, Mayor Mike Duggan. Mayor, thanks very much for coming back to Flashpoint.
Thanks for having me, Devin.
Good to have you here. There's a lot that I want to get to. I guess I want to start with the thing that it felt to me after the speech was that I was answering most on Twitter, and that was with no-fault reform.
Right.
You're going to start, you mentioned you're going to start holding meetings so that people understand how they can sort of harness this new ability that they have to tailor their own insurance. But I heard from a lot of people, a number of trial attorneys, personal injury attorneys, who believe that our system that we've set up, you said that night that if you have Medicare, you're probably in pretty good shape. You've got the kind of health care you need. There's still a lot of dispute about whether or not there's enough insurance to cover this, what has forever been duplicate insurance.
People of the state of Michigan have been ripped off on no fault for many years. And when Ohio and Indiana and Illinois and Wisconsin cost you $1,000 a year to insure your car, and in most of Michigan it's $2,500 and in Detroit it's $4,000, it's really hard to defend that system. I know your friends are doing that, but what Governor Whitmer, along with the Republican leader of the House, Lee Chatfield, and the Senate Majority Leader, Mike Shirkey, we actually had bipartisan cooperation. They did a good bill. Doesn't do everything we wanted, but it kicks in July 2nd. So a lot of people said, well, what happened to that no-fault bill? I haven't seen my reductions.
Yeah.
Well, it's because they phased it in. And the biggest thing that'll happen July 2nd, and I'll be holding a series of forums where I'm going to invite people to bring their bills, and we'll talk it through, is this. If you were in any one of the other 49 states and you have health care, you work for WDIV and you have Blue Cross or HAP, you're on Medicare. In any one of the other 49 states, if you got in a car accident, you could rely on your health care to take care of you, just as if you fell off a ladder. The only state in America that says you can't rely on your health care, you have to buy it a second time with your car, has been Michigan.
As you know, the late Brooks Patterson, no friend generally of the kind of onerous restrictions that law implied, said that it's mind-boggling how quickly you can go through what you think is a lifetime benefit, and that instead of thinking of Michigan as being the one state that had the worst insurance in the country, we should have realized that we were the ones with the best.
So it's a perfect example. Mm-hmm. Brooks Patterson was covered by his county health insurance. I mean, he would have been covered. What we're saying is that if you want to keep your $3,000 or $4,000 policy, you can. The governor's bill allows that. But if you want to be like the other 49 states, I mean, Devin, you've made it a choice in the level of health care. If you have a stroke tomorrow, you've got Blue Cross or Health Alliance plan. You could have bought an extra $100,000 a year policy to cover everything, but you have a choice. And what happens July 2nd is if you're on Medicare or you have health care coverage that covers it, you'll have a choice. Am I going to rely on the health care coverage for every other incident in my life, or do I want to buy second coverage of my car insurance? That's the choice you'll have July 2nd.
That, to me, is really, there's a level of responsibility that we're all going to have to assume here for what we choose as coverage. Let's move on. If there was one portion of your address that I think seemed to inspire any kind of anger or real blowback, it was about the tax assessment problem. We've got a number of lawsuits, as you know, against the city and the county. You said that night that if yes, you were overtaxed, you were overassessed, but that money is not coming back, it's been spent. If I had robbed a bank and my defense was, look, yes, I did take the money, but I'm sorry, it's gone, I can't possibly pay it back, that probably wouldn't fly. Is there really no way for these folks to get any kind of recourse?
Again, it would fly under a statute of limitations. So, but let's just talk about what happened. I ran for mayor in 2013. In significant part because the people of the city were being overassessed. Yep. I campaigned against it every day. It was well known that the city did not reduce those assessments, and people are acting like they discovered it in 2020. My first month in office, January 2014, I cut the rates 22%. I said, we're correcting the past inequities. There's not...
We didn't get the full reassessment of everybody's property till 2017.
That was the businesses that got done in 2017. This city as a whole was at market in 2014. Doesn't mean every single house was, but with that 22% cut my first month in office, the city as a whole was at market. But what the law says is each year that goes by, there's an appeal process, and the year closes. Because, as I said at the State of the City speech, you can't go back to the Detroit Public Schools and say, hey, the money you paid the teachers in 2010 was overassessed, I want it back, which doesn't allow you to go backwards. So what I did instead was I went to Lansing, I got payment plans, we got money from Quicken to offer subsidies, we've got programs where people bought back. We've cut the foreclosures for 6 years. In this city, we've cut the foreclosures from 5,000 to 300. I've worked it every single day for 6 years to undo the damage. But I have no way of going back to 2011 and deal with what was overassessed then. I ran for mayor to stop it, and I have stopped it.
I mentioned that you talked a lot about equity that night in creating this Detroit Equity Council. There was a really, I think, telling study from, I think it was last year. 80% of black business owners in Detroit said that they didn't feel like they were a part of what was going on, of the city's resurgence, and trying to reconnect them with that. But I guess the question is that a message management problem, that they don't feel a part of it, or is it real and they aren't a part of it?
Well, as I showed last at the speech, just in one stretch of Livernois, in 1 year, 16 businesses have opened, 15 of them black-owned businesses. And so there's no question in this country there are huge obstacles for people of color starting businesses, including lack of family wealth to get started in the business, to discrimination and loans right down the line. And so I've taken this issue on. And things like Motor City Match, where we've now opened more than 100 businesses with these quarterly competitions, almost 80% of them entrepreneurs of color. I went to Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan, and along with Kellogg Foundation, he opened this Entrepreneur of Color Loan Fund, $18 million in loans. Another 75 businesses have expanded. It is hard work to reverse years of barriers. But in the city of Detroit, it's a story that I got to say, frankly, the media doesn't cover very well. There are a whole lot of black entrepreneurs driving the city of Detroit's recovery. I was just with a whole group of them yesterday at a fair at Wayne County Community College, and a bunch of them came to me and said, thank you for mentioning me, and a whole bunch came up and said, can I be in your speech next year? I think we need to do more to recognize what's being accomplished.
Part of it is the message then. The marijuana conversation is really interesting to me. Detroit is eventually going to opt in. We've got lawsuits right now from people who are upset with how slowly Detroit is moving into this recreational space, but you kind of openly admitted that you see all these suburban communities that are going to opt out, and we're going to be back to that model that many people have talked about over the years, where Detroit's going to be where they go for their vice and then they head home with it. So
61% of the people of the city voted in November 2018 to legalize marijuana. I feel, as the elected mayor, this wasn't an issue I was looking to get into, but I have a responsibility to follow that. The question is, who has a seat at the table? Who owns the companies? And we were on a trend that 90% of the marijuana retail stores in Detroit would be opened by people outside the city, which, you're right, means people could come from outside to buy it, and then the profits. And so James Tate has just shown tremendous leadership on this, and I'm in agreement with him. We should opt in. but I want to opt in a way that says we'll welcome investment from the outside, but 1 out of every 2 licenses we issued has to be owned by a bona fide Detroiter. And I've got a fair amount of feedback, and overwhelmingly, even some of the outside investors say, you know, you're right. We need to be doing more to make sure that Detroiters get a fair chance. But you got to be intentional. If we sit by and do nothing, the people who lined up the property, the people who lined up the supply of marijuana, were almost entirely, in many cases, national chains that have moved from Colorado to California and the like. If we didn't act, you would have national organizations taking over the distribution and leaving Detroiters out.
And it's clearly going to be obviously very lucrative for someone. There was another criticism that I saw that you didn't spend near enough time talking about crime in Detroit, that it has not, we still see way too many menacing crimes and not enough positive direction on fixing this problem that's vexed us forever.
If WDIV had given me 90 minutes instead of 60 minutes, I would have talked about crime, I would have talked about the arts, I would have talked about water. And so you end up making decisions on what you're trying to do in the amount of time you have. But Chief Craig and the Detroit Police Department, I think, are doing a great job. We got great partnerships with the U.S. Attorney in Wayne County. I would say the single biggest thing we need right now are more officers in patrol cars, slowing down speeders, making traffic stops, and we've got to hire 400 officers in the next year. And I talked in detail about how we do that, and I will talk to you about crime for as long as you like.
You did talk about the 400. That's a big ask. Last thing I wanted to get to before we got to wrap it up. And you've been a little coy about how you feel about this, but as a former prosecutor and as a former mayor, I think you're uniquely positioned to talk about whether or not Kwame Kilpatrick's sentence should be commuted by the president or get granted clemency by the president.
I am not going to get myself in the middle of it because I do not have a good relationship with President Trump, and my expressing my opinion is not going to matter. But I've said this before. I've known Kwame Kilpatrick when he was at Cass in high school. He studied for law school in the office next to me when his father was working there. His kids would play in my office after he was done teaching at school, and I was with him shortly before
but you also
resigned.
uniquely know what he cost the city.
And so I don't have a way of being objective. I just have very deep feelings toward him and the talent that he has. And I think that talent could do a lot of good in this world, and I hope he gets a chance to use it. But I don't want to potentially jeopardize anything that's going by commenting specifically. But he's somebody that I've watched grow up, and I have strong feelings for him.
Mayor Duggan, it's always good to have you on the program. Really appreciate you being here this morning.
Thank you, Devin.
We'll be back with more. We'll talk more about Kwame Kilpatrick on Flashpoint, the local 4 right after this.
Ready to purchase your first home? Not only will Hall Financial get you pre-approved same day, we're going to connect you with a top realtor in your area. Call 248-308-5000 or chat with us at davidhallmortgage.com.
Is your house cold and drafty? Are your energy bills through the roof? With Michigan's winter being so unpredictable, you cannot afford not to insulate your home another winter. Stop bleeding money. Insulate your walls and attic. Cut your energy bill up to 50% with Ace & Sons.
Hey, you see that? Sir, your wallet?
Exclusive video of Mike Morse chasing an ambulance. Mike Morse, known for his ubiquitous
Attorney Mike Morse actually
I guess if you want an ambulance chaser, you might as well get one that can catch it.
Hey, man, you dropped your wallet.
Taylor Chevrolet is saying yes and always yes. Yes to the right vehicle at the right price. And yes to overcoming past credit problems to get you financed. All applications welcome at TaylorChevy.com. Apply now for instant credit.
The President's Day sales event is on. The 20 Equinox is just $189 a month. Drive the Silverado Crew Cab for just $199.
In a world where negative things sometimes happen, it's great to know there's a positive outlook at your favorite dealership. Join the We Say Yes team at Taylor.
Monday at 5. Shots fired at a local get-together for retired cops.
Give us your hands! Give us your hands!
Why did one officer allegedly shoot another?
Cops like you guys.
Okay, well, you just kind of shot someone.
Yeah, well, you tried to kill me.
What in the world is going on here?
The Defenders with the reports, the body cam video, and more.
A Defenders exclusive you've got to see to believe. Monday on Local 4 News at 5.
All right, well, welcome back. Let's continue on this line of conversation about Kwame Kilpatrick, the former mayor of Detroit, in prison, who has Sherry Gay Denyogo, state representative, at the White House, trying to petition, apparently on behalf of a number of people, the president to get him out. We're joined now by Nolan Finley, the Detroit News, political consultant Adolph Mongo. Adolph, let me start with you. What are your thoughts about what the president would do in a moment like this?
Well, he led every Tom, Dick, and Harry. He gave them a pardon. Criminals, corrupt governors, corrupt sheriffs, corrupt police chiefs, etc. So I'm looking at that criteria. He should let the former mayor out.
He should or he will? Or both?
I don't know. You know what? People throw this out on the table. Would the black community vote for Trump if he lets former Mayor Kilpatrick out? Not necessarily. I think what he's been doing, he should let him out right now. 8 years, he lost his law license, he lost his family.
Yeah.
It's just a mess. I thought that 28 years was just too much, and whatever 10 years, that might have been the best sentence.
Your Sunday Detroit News includes a piece by Nolan Finley about why this won't happen, to your way of thinking.
Yeah, I mean, Adolph's right. Trump's been letting a lot of people out, including some corrupt politicians. But the issue, I think, with Kwame will be that, one, he hasn't acknowledged his crime. He hasn't accepted responsibility or expressed remorse. And those are generally prerequisites for a commutation or for clemency. He still maintains his innocence. And, he's been a good prisoner, I guess. He's been a model prisoner. But that's a key element. There's also the matter of the missing money. The feds still have search teams out there looking for the money that he's accused of stealing, or he was convicted of stealing. They're not going to let him go and take advantage of any ill-gotten gains he may have had. It's also the fact that he was offered a plea deal. He was offered 15 years and turned it down. And the courts don't reward people who roll the dice.
Well, to your point that he hasn't expressed any remorse, it seems to me Rod Blagojevich still insists that he didn't do anything wrong. And he was basically caught on tape trying to sell a U.S. Senate.
At his sentencing, though, he did express remorse in an effort to try to get a lighter sentences. There's a difference between Blagojevich and Kilpatrick in that the former Illinois governor, didn't get his payoff. And the feds believe Kwame got quite a bit of payoff, in fact, several millions of dollars that, again, they haven't reclaimed, haven't managed to find.
But and I know, Nolan, that people of color get smacked harder than these other folks that the president has let off, and none of them that I know, former sheriff in Arizona, they didn't express any remorse of what they did. They doubled down. I'm saying is that Kwame Kilpatrick got a raw deal. Shouldn't have got 28 years. He couldn't even go home and wrap up his business because the judge threw him in jail. And yet the feds let out a serial killer.
Well, let's talk to that.
28 years is
it's ridiculous.
I thought it was the only one who thinks.
No,
that
I
was
thought
excessive.
at the time it was, but federal sentencing guidelines are based like real estate assessments on comparables. And the comparable they used in the Kwame case was Jimmy DeMora, a Cuyahoga County, Ohio County Commissioner, who was convicted on almost the same exact charges, basically racketeering using his office as a criminal enterprise. Same charges Kwame faced. The sentencing guidelines for him were the same as Kwame, 30 to life. He also got 28 years. This was the same year Kwame was convicted,
But he ran his enterprise for 20 or 30 years. He was the man in Youngstown. So
I'm not sure the length of the crime.
It was an enterprise, though. But
it was criminal. It was racketeering, running a criminal enterprise.
I just have a problem.
He got the same sentence.
But I got a problem when You had an official in Macomb County get indicted by the feds and was allowed to leave the country. So yes,
let me ask you this, Adolf,
yes.
because you pointed out that it could complicate the way maybe some Detroit voters think about the president. Could it complicate the way suburban voters think about the president if he were to? Because Kwame Kilpatrick is not popular in Macomb County.
Wait a minute. President Trump said he can shoot somebody in the middle of the street and they still vote for him. So if the president decides to commute his sentence, I don't think he's going to lose any votes in Michigan.
Every vote he picked up in Detroit, and I doubt he'd pick up many, if any, he'd lose 2 in the suburbs. I agree with you.
I don't think so.
Kwame Kilpatrick was not popular among suburban voters.
We will march ahead and see what happens. Guys, thanks very much for your thoughts on it. It really is an interesting arena. We come back, we'll talk with Dr. Frank McGeorge about coronavirus. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.
You're looking at United Shore, one of the fastest growing companies in Metro Detroit. From the moment you step foot on its campus, you understand why United Shore is a one-of-a-kind workplace. And that goes well beyond the 1.5 million square foot state-of-the-art campus and its many convenient perks. Home to the #1 wholesale mortgage lender in the nation, UWM, United Shore is a company where people can build a career. Just ask the more than 2,000 team members promoted over the last 2 years. You heard that right. They don't have employees. They have team members, nearly 5,000 to be exact. Everyone engages you and welcomes you into a culture that's more like family, built on thoughtfulness and friendship. The office layout is open, just like the doors of the company's leaders. Fundraisers and volunteering are commonplace. Meetings aren't allowed on Thursdays. And there's a long-standing commitment to a firm 40. That's a 40-hour work week and the promise of having time to have a life. Sound like a place that could work for you? Go to unitedshore.com to learn more.
Don't overpay. Save. Sunday and Monday, only at Gardner White.
All right, let's turn quickly to the coronavirus in light of Governor Whitmer's decision on Friday to move the state to an emergency footing. You've noticed we're trying to bring you the latest verified information on the virus in each of our newscasts. A few days ago, I asked our Dr. Frank McGeorge to take me through his thoughts right now as an emergency room physician at Henry Ford Hospital, an ER being a likely first point of contact for a patient. Let me start with where you are on our general sense of, I don't want to call it panic, but our alertness. Is it appropriate, or are we maybe a little bit ahead of just how, bad this might be?
Well, I think that, the public health officials have done a great job of alerting everyone about the current risk that it could spread in the United States. And by could, I mean really that they have put out the word that it is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. So then it becomes a question of degree and the degree of containment. And that's going to mean a lot of focus on personal protection, social distancing, cleaning environmental surfaces, those kinds of things, because we have no direct treatment for this. Now, that said, hopefully people will take these things seriously and begin to make preparations for when social distancing might be necessary.
We are seeing people make a lot of some life changes, life thinking about this, people who are putting off travel now, not wanting to be on an airplane. But you've pointed out on the newscast a couple of times, the rate of the flu is much higher. Now, many more people die of the flu. The mortality rate is probably, I guess it looks to be about 3 times higher with the coronavirus. So it is more deadly if you get it, but it's still, most of us don't say we're not going to go do something because we wouldn't want to catch the flu today.
Well, that's accurate, but there's a lot of things about the coronavirus that we don't know. That's part of the issue. And so until our full body of knowledge develops, we're still in a wait and see posture. And I think an excess amount of caution is due because there is so much that we don't know. I mean, I want you to keep in mind, This only became something that we became aware of about 2 months ago.
It's just very new.
Right. We don't really have a great body of knowledge. And in fact, the majority of our information has accelerated over the last 30 days or so. And we are learning more every single day, every time a new paper is published and new data comes out.
There are the other troubling factors, and you and I talk about this off the air every single day, I should point out as well. There are a number of things that kind of go, ooh, and among them that you can be a carrier of this, it would appear, without being symptomatic. That's a problem.
That is a potential. And, you know, that's something that health officials have looked at quite a bit. And again, until we get more data, we're not going to know exactly to the degree, but it does appear that there is the potential for asymptomatic transmission. There was a case report in JAMA of a 20-year-old woman who transmitted it to 5 family members while she was completely without symptoms. There were the German travelers. That was a case report that was also published. That was subsequently, I don't want to quite say debunked, but significantly challenged. But the word on the street, as it were, among public health officials is that it is likely that there is an asymptomatic transmission. That is, even though I don't have symptoms, I'm within 6 feet of you, I might still be able to give it to you. That is still a high possibility.
We see this rush for surgical masks. Do you have a great sense yet of whether or not that's an effective way to keep from getting it?
Well, so if you are sick, surgical masks will keep you from introducing it right into the environment. If you are a healthcare worker, wearing a mask is a sensible and really the right thing to do. For the general public, it's not really clear yet. There is actually one interesting study that was out that showed that the rates of influenza with N95 masks was not significantly decreased. So in other words, N95 masks, which are the higher grade medical masks that we use, are not perfect. They are not 100% guarantee of anything. And in some ways, they may give someone a false sense of or a false sense of security. But I will say, if someone is coughing in your face and you do not have a mask on, you will be extremely sensitive and frankly kind of paranoid. I mean, I know that when someone coughs in my face and I don't have a mask on, I think for the next 2 hours, oh gosh, did they just give me something?
Doc, thanks so much for the update, and here's to looking forward to that day when we don't have to do daily updates on it, but for the time being, we certainly will. That's going to do it for us. Thanks for being here this morning. Meet the Press coming up next. We'll see you next time right back here for Flashpoint.